A joint communique that was issued this week after your BRICS ministerial on Thursday says the following. The ministers reiterated their commitment to multilateralism through upholding international law, including the purposes and principles enshrined in the UN Charter as its indispensable cornerstone, and to the central role of the UN in an international system in which sovereign states cooperate to maintain peace and security and advance sustainable development. Why, sir, have you signed on to a communique that so obviously contradicts the Russian Federation's actions on the ground as it relates to Ukraine? And you've also just said in the UN General Assembly that you support Brazil and India's permanent status in the UN Security Council. Why did you not mention South Africa? Thank you.
Can you tell me what exactly from the
paragraph 4 of the communique,
from the language what exactly from this language you believe contradicts our behavior?
I'll quote the Secretary General. He says that any annexation of a state's territory by another state resulting from the threat or use of force...
No, you're quoting Secretary General.
Yes, but...
I can only be responsible for what I subscribe to, and this
You have said that you are you have signed up to the principles enshrined in the UN Charter. The Secretary General says you have not. And your actions on the ground in Ukraine...
The Secretary General says many things in this regard, and he is commenting the situation around Ukraine on almost a daily basis, while I don't remember that he was active enough to promote the Minsk Agreement's implementation. I will explain to you. The principles of the United Nations Charter provide for respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of states. At the same time, they provide for respect for the right of people for self-determination. And the apparent conflict between these two concepts has been subject to many negotiations quite a long time. Soon after the United Nations was established, a process was started to develop the understanding of all the principles of the Charter.
If somebody is to tell me now that after the coup in 2014 in Ukraine, after the prohibition on the Russian language, Russian education, Russian media outlets, after the putschists for many long years continued to bombard the territory whose population refused to recognize the results of the coup, if after all of this somebody dares to tell me that the clique which is sitting in Kiev, the neo-Nazi regime seated there, pushing Nazi theory and practice in the legislation, that this regime represents the interests of the people in the east of Ukraine, I would probably simply smile, because for any impartial observer, it is absolutely clear that this regime completely fails to represent those people who feel themselves to be the bearers of the Russian language and the Russian culture. Everything is a Russian. Where a quote? If you wish to, I quoted, if you wish to be Russian, then leave. Is this representation of the interests of the people? Of course, the Secretary General has the right to make statements. This is his statement, and I signed on to what was approved at the ministerial meeting of BRICS. Indeed, there is a paragraph where we set out the fact that ministers took note of the approaches to the situation in Ukraine, which each country sets out in the relevant fora, including at the Security Council and the General Assembly of the United Nations. That is honest. Nobody says in unison. Everybody has different views. I mentioned India and Brazil for a single reason. They have long officially advanced their candidatures. As for South Africa, the Republic of South Africa, this step has not been put forward, and African countries, members of the African Union, are committed to the Eswatini consensus that was arrived at many years ago, and this is their collective position. However, addressing the question of expansion of the Security Council without meeting, reflecting the interests of Africans is not possible.